So we're going to get started with our presentations, and we have Melissa Thelen, our research chair. I'm always in awe of Melissa, how she's become a part-time scientist. Her knowledge of BBSOAS and the NR2F1 gene continually dazzles me. So she's going to do an amazing job of translating all that science for us. Melissa, if you can share a bit more about your journey as well. Thank you.
Sorry, just want to be able to follow along here. So, hi everyone, Melissa Thelen, Research Chair. I'm going to save the personal part for the end, just so I can get to the business, and we'll circle back on that at the end. But what I want to cover first and foremost with you all is, is there a clicker? What are we on? Agenda? Okay, perfect. Okay. So what I wanted to cover is some of the research goals that we've established and what we're working towards, some of the current projects that have been keeping us busy, some of which you just heard about in our key achievements this year, how closely we're working with Combined Brain on specific initiatives, and then a little bit more about our scientific advisory team and the work happening in their labs. Oops. Okay. Sorry. So our research goals are broadly to identify potential treatments, and those could be treatments that truly impact the NR2F1 gene, but they could also be treatments that impact our day-to-day lives, things that help with seizure control or GI issues or low muscle tone or some of the other characteristics that we see within our patients. And then also prepare for clinical trials and grant funding opportunities. You can't just show up and put forward an application. There's so much work that goes into being ready for those opportunities, and making sure that we are ready is a big part of our goal. One of the biggest lessons that I've had to learn in getting into the research position for BBSOAS is that there's a constant balance between really focusing on basic science and also translational research. And the basic science piece is really important. That's really pure science, understanding, what's happening in proteins and neurons and the basics of how our body is functioning and how the functioning is different because you have a mutation or deletion in NR2F1. And the translational research is really kind of where the magic happens. It's where you're taking that knowledge and you're starting to work towards treatments that can really have a major impact. So I have a quick quiz for us all. Does anyone know how many genes there are in the human body? Dr. Schroff, you can't answer. Yeah. Any guesses? Hundreds, thousands? Hundreds? Hundreds of thousands? So there are actually 20,000 genes in humans that we've identified to this point. Does anyone know how many of those genes we understand today? 3? Oh, 1,000. Any other guesses? So it's actually about 20%, or 4,000 genes that are well understood today. NR2F1 is not one of those genes, unfortunately. So a big piece of what we're doing is focusing more on better understanding NR2F1. So we know a few things today. We know where it's located. We know that it's a transcription factor. And Dr. Schroff and Sarah will correct me on anything I get wrong here, but really, part of what that gene is doing is translating into RNA, and it's the RNA that's actually instructing how the body makes proteins. And the proteins have different functions to perform in our body. The problem is if that gene is mutated or we don't have enough of it, then everything downstream is impacted. And that's what we're seeing in our children. NR2F1, another thing we know about it is that it has a big impact in early cortical development. So it's in the developing mind when the baby's still in our womb that the impact is felt. So we have, definitely a lot more to learn about NR2F1 to be ready. To be ready for these grant opportunities and ultimately for clinical trials, which is one of my major goals for us to accomplish. So this is a checklist of things, and think about this as kind of how we would build a business case for pharma to get them to invest in our patients and further developing treatments for them. So certainly we need to better understand just the mechanisms of BBSOAS. And a lot of that work goes back to the basic science things we touched on. But we also need mouse models and human cell models because we need a place to test any treatments or better understand that basic science in a way that's unobtrusive. We can get some biosamples hopefully, but we probably can't do it every time. We need more data. And so those models really help to inform a lot of what we're able to understand about BBSOAS today. We have our patient registry because, of course, pharma is going to want to know who are we treating, who are these patients, and what else do we know about them. We need, ultimately, a disease concept study. That's a priority for the FDA to better understand overall BBSOAS. And then we're going to need proof. And that's where things like biomarkers and outcome measures really come into play. We want to know that if there is a specific treatment deployed within our population, how can we measure that it worked or didn't work? And those are two things we'll touch on in greater detail as we go through here. I know a lot of this terminology is brand new to probably a lot of you, and so I'm going to do my best to just kind of help walk you through what these things mean as we go through this. And then finally, we also need interactions with the FDA. It's important to be networking with the group that actually decides if we get the green light to move forward on a specific treatment. So, these are some of the various projects that we've been focused on. Really, it's amazing, within even a year's time. I had done this same presentation for the board about a year ago, and I had to change most of these projects because the ones we had done have moved on and we've started a new round. And so I'll touch on each of these as we go through it, but a lot of time goes into making sure these are successful for us and collaborating with our scientific team. So first and foremost, combined brain. And I would say combined brain you could think of very much as an elite sorority or fraternity that you definitely want to be a part of if you're a neurodevelopmental disorder. It has provided us with a network of other disorders further along the path, maybe discovered decades ago, where they have had more insights. They've kind of gone through this clinical trial readiness. And so they're guiding us to make sure that we can do it in the most efficient way, and also providing us with projects and access that we just never would be able to find if we were just NR2F1 Foundation. Through Combined Brain, we also have Sarah, and Carly and Jen touched on this. She's been our scientific officer for over a year. She's amazing. She's the go-to person anytime I'm very confused by the science side of things, who can help make sense of it for us, and just connecting the dots in everything that is available to us as resources through Combined Brain, through the literature, really helping shape where we go next as a foundation. And I'm excited you'll hear from her shortly. I'm sorry. There you are, Sarah. One of the projects that we got involved in through Combined Brain this past year was ORCA, which is Observer-Reported Communication Assessment. And so this is really part of those outcome measures. It is something that Combined Brain said these types of projects have to be a priority because I know we've all filled out a million surveys that don't have have very little relevance to at least Haley in filling them out, but yet they are the standard for how we measure any sort of treatment. And so things like the Vineland, I don't know if you've had to do that once or twice or many times, but we need more than just things like the Vineland to ensure that we have the ability to get into the nuances of what a treatment might be impacting in our patients. They may be nonverbal, but they still have an amazing ability to communicate their will and their desires. And these types of assessments will really help us showcase where we're seeing differences, even if they are slight. And the important thing here is that this wouldn't apply just to BBSOAS, but it would apply across all neurodevelopmental disorders. And so what we were tasked with doing as part of the ORCA team, and this is all run by Duke, it's a group of scientists who build out and validate these sort of assessment measures. And so they asked us to bring, I think, 10 to 12 patients, and it was a very specific mix. We had to have so many girls, so many boys, so many deletions, so many mutations. I was like, okay, we'll try. And applause to those who participated in this for us. So we had 11 patients. We're going to hear more from Christine tomorrow about the ORCA and some of what we learned through going through this and how BBSOAS compared to some of the other neurodevelopmental disorders. This is something that ultimately the FDA will have to decide on, and the nice part of being involved in this process was we also got to teach the FDA a little bit about BBSOAS through it. So we presented to them, we showed them some videos of some of our patients and how they communicate today. So we're getting on their radar, which I love. The second measure that we're focusing on, and it's just in a working group status right now, is a CVI measure, which is obviously so impactful for all of our patients. Sarah is leading this, which is amazing to get to work closely with her on this project as well, but it's all the leaders in CVI from across the country that are coming together right now, trying to look at all the different CVI assessments out there. How can we consolidate them, dig in deeper, find something that, just like the ORCA, will speak to the nuances and talk about nuances. Boy, does CVI have them. So it's going to be interesting to see where we go, but it's a wonderful collaboration project for us with all of the leaders in the CVI field right now. And this is something I'm sure we'll talk about as we go through the next updates for you community. Now I want to touch on the Combined Brain Industry Biomarker Project. As Jen mentioned, we were able to collect 20 patient samples, and these are groups that came to Combined Brain, and these are all various pharma companies, some are pretty big, and said, hey, we want to look at neurodevelopmental disorders more globally. So it would be really helpful if you could collect patient samples from several different groups that we're most interested in and let us analyze them further to see, are there any commonalities between these disorders that we might be able to treat? So unfortunately, in their list of combined brain disorders, BBSOAS didn't make the list of ones that they were interested in pursuing further. And so, we talked to Sarah and said, wow, this is a great opportunity. We would love to do this. Can you advocate for us? And boy, did she. And, we said, okay, then we'll do our best to deliver these 20 patient samples. It was an effort for sure. And thank you, first of all, to all of the families that participated in this. It really, I think, is a giant leap forward for us as BBSOAS, and definitely deserves another round of applause for everyone. Thank you. Some of the families drove like 3 hours during Christmas week to do this, so pretty amazing. Okay, and so this is how I picture, the work happening on those samples, sorry. What they're doing is a ton of statistical analysis, trying to figure out, if a patient has seizures, are there any things that we can identify as a common cause, maybe at the protein level, that are going to impact it? And I'll be honest, we're kind of a hard sell to pharma companies as a patient population at this size. But when you put that with 20 or 30 other neurodevelopmental disorders, it gets a lot more interesting because there's more revenue for them at the end of the day. And this is something that, being able to have their exposure to these pharma companies as part of this project, and also hopefully some amazing learnings about what is similar about our disorder. It is fascinating to see within the combined brain disorders how many have CVI, how many have low muscle tone. There's a lot more that we share, and you might see this in your local communities, at your kids' schools. There tend to be some very common themes across the disorders. And so hopefully that will lead us to some amazing possibilities. Okay. So yeah, just speaking further to what we hope to learn here with the NR2F1 gene. So I do want to kind of speak in more detail to our BBSOAS dream team. We're so lucky to have such an amazing scientific advisory team. What I wanted to do is just touch on high level. You're going to hear from a lot of these people as we go through the next rounds of presentations. But I think as a parent, the things that I listen to for what each one brings to the table, and just to kind of emphasize their commitment to our community. So we'll just go through one by one. But as Jen mentioned, what's amazing is we all were able to come together and collaborate in a day in Denver, working on this research roadmap that's been, on the list of priorities to do for a long time. It was great to hear the collaboration that's already been happening behind the scenes and really figure out how can we continue to drive that forward. So, in Dr. Schaaf's lab, we have a couple projects that the foundation has sponsored there over the past probably 5 years since our existence. Some of you may remember the first real fundraising effort we did was to just kind of get some stem cell lines that could be used for further research. And that really was meant to drive some of that basic science again and help the team to better understand the function of NR2F1 in the body. And it took the need for research to even a next level with the TRIP BBSOAS research, which is more recent, and a $50,000 fundraising effort that we started in July of last year. And this is really important, again, to kind of make sure that the mouse models, which had existed in other labs for various specific types of BBSOAS patients, all are consolidated into Dr. Schaaf's lab, and that we're starting to look more closely at the brain development and downstream targets. I love that this is also our basis for future therapeutic treatments. And then, as Jen mentioned, we could not be more excited to have a postdoc focused on NR2F1 and also serving as the glue between these different labs to make sure that we have another person to communicate with and better understand everything that's happening behind the scenes. One of the things I'm very excited about, when we first met Dr. Schaaf in Houston 4 years ago maybe, he had said, what if there was the possibility to block? We have two versions of NR2F1 in our body. What if we could block the mutated version of NR2F1 and only have the healthy version working in the body? It might mirror maybe more what you see in patients with deletions. Our daughter has a mutation in the DNA binding domain, so it really is impactful globally, the mutation. And so I was like, that sounds amazing. And come to find out there is a company that focuses on kind of creating this type of treatment, which is called an ASO. And Dr. Shaw happens to have a connection there from his time at Baylor, and so they have been, taking the baby steps towards figuring out if this is a potential path for us, which is very, very exciting. Okay, another couple questions for you all. Does anyone happen to know how many pediatric neuro-ophthalmologists there are in the United States? 5, 100? You're actually like right in the middle. I couldn't even find the answer on ChatGPT. So, but it is about 50 the last time I asked Dr. Shaw. So this is a very, very rare specialty. Neuro-ophthalmologists are, not common, but then you add needing to go through that additional round of pediatric training, and there are just very few people who do this. And does anyone have a guess at how many also understand CVI pretty well? Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to advance. So honestly, usually at a CVI conference, it's Dr. Shaw who presents, because he's the one really best informed in not only this expertise, but also CVI. So the fact that he's on our scientific advisory board is just pretty incredible. You couldn't ask for somebody more well-versed and really at the top of their game when it comes to this expertise. And he's brought then not only himself to kind of our community, but the team of experts in CVI at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. He specifically sought out that facility or institution. He wanted a place where he would have the CVI expertise in optometry and occupational therapy, and then also wanted kind of a place where he could have a lab and he could do some further research. And so the BBSOAS Center of Excellence is amazing as a resource for us parents, but it's also so impactful because we now have a place to start collecting some of that natural history data. That's really an important item on our checklist that it's hard to get unless you have a standardized way of capturing notes on patients. And part of what we're trying to drive through the patient registry, really, but to the FDA or to a pharma company, if it's our voice making those assessments versus a medical scientific voice making those assessments, it really matters. And so this is, I can't recommend highly enough going there, trying to meet with the entire team. If you don't have a CVI diagnosis, you end up on a even specific path to help you get that diagnosis as part of your time there. So if this is within driving distance for you or something you can do as a family, I would really highly recommend it. And I think this is also an evolving part of what we're doing. Right now we're kind of focusing on the vision and those aspects, but I could see us adding in things like an EEG and other things that will help drive what we know about our patients in the long term. The other thing that was mentioned was our R01 grant. This has been a long time project, and I didn't realize, first of all, how much effort and time and preparation goes into applying for these grants. This is an opportunity we have through the National Eye Institute, which is part of the National Institute of Health in the US. It's a 5-year grant for $500,000. So we've either got to win the grant or we've got to raise the money to make sure this research goes forward. So this would definitely be the easier path for us, not for the scientists. So thank you for all you're doing. And Sarah, again, is coordinating this effort. But it's really exciting. The team was waiting for just some preliminary results in the mouse models. They've been sharing the mouse models between the lab and then testing the compounds that we think could have an impact on NR2F1 from other research. And it's all green lights so far. So even I think getting to this point is massive for us, and hopefully the FDA, or not the FDA in this case, the NEI recognizes. And the good news is Dr. Shaw has kind of done some networking with the team there, trying to better understand what are their priorities, and CVI is one of their top priorities as well. So we're hoping that helps our case. I'll touch briefly on Dr. Studer. She is out of France, and I think the thing that is so amazing about Dr. Studer and her entire team is that they were focused on NR2F1 and studying the deletion in mouse models even before there were patients identified with BBSOAS. And so this is, part of her life's work is kind of focused on the gene that matters so much to our families. And they have done, a lot of work in the mouse models, which is now brought into some of the other lab with their cooperation and support. They're focusing on some of just the cortical development now, looking more at human stem cells in that lab as well. And as you'll probably hear from her, the depth that she can explain on what they're understanding about the eye and the impact of the brain system because of having a mutation or deletion is pretty phenomenal. So I'm excited for her presentation. And she works very closely with NR2F1 France, obviously her kind of local NR2F1 organization, and just helps us stay in unity with what's happening there. Another team out of Heidelberg is Magdalena Lausch in her lab, and they, again, someone who, is very focused on NR2F1 and really wants to understand more about the impact of that gene. She is someone who benefited from those stem cell lines that we created years ago and has been doing a lot of work in those iPSCs. She really wants to understand what happens kind of upstream or downstream from the gene itself. And so I think a lot of what's happening there will help inform the basic research and what we need to understand. So, as we look at our clinical trial readiness, our checklist does not look so bad. We've done a lot, and we're getting there, I think, on understanding the mechanisms of BBSOAS. We have the mouse models representing all types of patients we see in our BBSOAS community. We have cell models now that represent, we're starting to collect natural history data through the BBSOAS Center of Excellence. We have our patient registry, which Katya will speak more about. And thank you all for all you've contributed to the time and energy that goes into keeping those up to date. The disease concept study is something that we're going to work through Combined Brain to create. It is right now on the docket for 2026. We don't have biomarkers, but we have a biorepository. We're building it while we're all here, which is amazing. We're building towards those outcome measures with ORCA and CVI, and we don't really have any FDA interactions yet. We have to work on that one. So, last piece for me is just kind of better understanding what is your role in BBSOAS research. I think most importantly, understanding your patient's phenotype. Do they have a deletion? Do they have a mutation? Is it in the DNA binding domain? Is it in the ligand binding domain? Is it in the initiation codon? Just know where you fit, because those treatments and the path forward and the outcome measures that we want to plug you into as part of the community that represents BBSOAS in them, all of that requires us understanding that piece. So if you don't know that, make sure you work with your genetic counselor, or if you have your genetic report here, I'm sure Dr. Schroff could help inform you on where you kind of fit within our community. Stay on top of the patient registry. These samples, whether you're here and can do this here, or whether you're virtual and can hopefully be part of the roadshow through Combined Brain, that's impactful. Certainly, this industry biomarker project is amazing, but anytime any future research comes up, we want to make sure we're ready. Visit the BBSOAS Center of Excellence in Cincinnati, as I mentioned. And then I think it's really important to just send our scientific advisors and their labs your appreciation. They are people dedicating day in and day out without any connection or exposure to our patients to this work. So, send them a thank you, and we can provide you with the addresses for all these various teams. Their emails are usually even on like the website for the institution where they work. So send them a picture of your kid or a Christmas card. And then, as Tim will address, please fundraise. I think it's so important that we all kind of also have the right funding available when these opportunities arise. Even with not being selected originally into the industry biomarker project, we have to pay a little bit. It's a couple $1,000s at the end of the day, but the foundation, thankfully, we've done some fundraising in the past year. We can afford to make sure we can move forward with that project. But we don't want to ever be in the position where we don't have the funds to have access to amazing opportunities. And I think we all need to do our piece there in whatever little way you can. So that's all from the research side. Thank you all. And yeah, looking forward to all of the in-depth conversations going forward. Oh, Haley. So Haley is 7. We live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and she attends the Western Pennsylvania School for the Blind. Haley's, in a lot of therapies, and hippotherapy, and OT, and PT, and speech. She's nonverbal. She's not walking yet. But I'm sure you'll hear her laugh while we're here, which is delightful. And she's what drives us to do this work. Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
So for virtual, sorry, 1 second. For virtuals, we had a comment thanking Melissa for all her work and for the presentation, helped to clarify and break down the work that we're doing here as a.
Was that my mom?
What'd you say? Sorry.
Was that my mom?
No, that was my husband. Asking for clarification.
I thought you said it was a virtual
Sorry.
comment.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you would have access to some of your slides, because there were lists that you made of that I couldn't possibly.
Yeah, definitely. I think will everyone get all the slides?
So the question in the room was, will you have access to the slides? Yes, we'll make available access to all the slides, yeah. Are there any more questions in the room? I'm going to bring you the microphone if there is. Or we'll go to virtuals. Oh, okay, 1 sec.
My question is just about the Children's Hospital in Cincinnati. How do we sign up to participate in that?
Yeah, so the question was, how do we sign up to go to the Center of Excellence in Cincinnati? Dr. Shaw has kind of a coordinator that works with him very closely, and she's keeping the waiting list of everyone who would like to go. I think they try and get us in every month or a couple months and do 2 to 3 patients on a given day. So the team kind of dedicates their day to BBSOAS. So I can give you her email, or we can send it out maybe with some of the follow-up. I can put it in a slide so that you can work with her to get on the list and see the next time you can get in. Dr. Shaw, as he may mention tomorrow, is expecting a baby, so I think he's going to be out a little bit in May and maybe June. But yeah, it's an amazing team, an amazing opportunity. Good question.
Any more in the room?
Appreciate your patience, because as Melissa said, it's only 2 to 3 patients in a month or 20 months that we can squeeze in.
Sorry. Thank you. I was just saying that we appreciate your patience for those here in this room and virtually who have been waiting to get to the clinic. As Melissa said, it really, we're excited to have this, but because Dr. Shaw works with, as his full-time job, he sees all kinds of patients with visual impairments, not just our kids. So he can only take 2 to 3 of our patients a month, and sometimes even 2 months. Yeah. So we're doing the best we can. My suggestion would be to keep emailing, keep hounding, call, do what you can. I'm sure you all are used to that. Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Do we have any questions online? No? Okay. All right. Oh.
Hi, I had a question for the ORCA, specifically the surveys, because we have completed one for our daughter, but I guess it's the same. So all the BBSOAS kids have slow improvements. So my question was, do you know if that survey would be taken and given something like a follow-up on the survey in 3 months, 3 years or something like that, so we can see the improvements or anything like that?
Yeah, so the goal would be something like the ORCA or any of these outcome measures that we develop would go into things like our patient registry. And so they would be surveys that we could take on an ongoing basis at various snap points in time to see what developments do we see. And for the future generations of BBSOAS patients, how great to see maybe there's a big leap in communication abilities, between 5 and 8. And to know when you're so frustrated at 5, that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Hello, I just wanted to know if there is any specific research on the epilepsy relation with the NR2F1 also.
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, nothing specific that we're sponsoring as a foundation today or that I can speak to. I think that is definitely an area where I would like to personally see us dive in more. It impacts our life with Haley. And so happy to speak with you one-on-one about some of our learnings, and maybe we should, get a group together where epilepsy is important to, our families' lives to better understand. All the work happening certainly will help. I mean, that would probably be one of the things that we would see first as far as an impact on any treatment would be fewer seizures, but nothing focused on it right now.
And if you're online, can we, if you want to chat any questions in the chat box, then please do, and we're moderating those. So if you're online, please participate, ask your questions, and we'll read them out in the room as well.